In the cold depths of space, where silence reigns supreme and death comes in 1,000 forms, there exists a truth that every alien species has learned to fear. Never wake a sleeping human. The Galactic Council had spent 3 centuries cataloging the remnants of the extinct Terran civilization. Humanity, they believed, had vanished in their own nuclear fire 200 years ago. Their artifacts were museum pieces, their technology primitive curiosities, their frozen remains specimens for study. But deep within the research vessel Cryopod, nestled in Section 7 of the Xenobiology Lab, something stirred within a cracked cryogenic pod marked with a faded skull and the words Phantom Protocol. Authorized personnel only. What the alien researchers didn't know was that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their bombs or their ships. It was their refusal to stay dead when the galaxy needed them most. And Phantom-9, the last of Earth's Go soldiers, was about to remind the universe why humans were never meant to be underestimated. Some mistakes change everything. Some awakenings reshape the stars themselves. The research vessel Cryopod drifted through the Veil Nebula like a metal whale hunting for ancient treasures. Its hull, a patchwork of different alien technologies welded together over decades of exploration, bore the scars of countless expeditions into the dangerous unknown. Inside its cramped corridors, 17 different species worked together under the banner of the Galactic Archaeological Consortium. Their mission simple yet profound: catalog and preserve the remnants of extinct civilizations. Chief Research Officer Vexai Morthun adjusted his 4 arms around the data tablet, his scaled green skin catching the blue light of the holographic display surrounding him. The Ziltharian had spent 47 years studying dead species, but none fascinated him quite like the humans. For a species that had barely reached beyond their own solar system before destroying themselves, they had left behind remarkably sophisticated technology. The irony wasn't lost on him that a species too violent to survive had created some of the most elegant defensive systems the galaxy had ever seen. "Sir, we've finished the preliminary scan of Section 7, announced DR. Yilpura, her chitinous exoskeleton clicking as she moved between the workstations. The insectoid Hivemar was one of the finest xenobiologists in the consortium, her compound eyes capable of detecting details that would escape most other species. The human specimens are in various states of preservation, but most of the cryogenic systems failed decades ago. Vexai nodded, making notes on his tablet. The Cryopod had discovered this particular human derelict ship 3 months ago, floating dead in space near what their star charts indicated had once been a minor human colony. The vessel itself was a military transport, heavily armored and bearing the distinctive angular design that humans seem to favor. Unlike their technology, human architecture seemed to embrace harsh lines and functional brutality. "Any signs of the plague?" he asked, referring to the bioweapon that had supposedly wiped out the human species 2 centuries ago. The Galactic Council had classified it as a Category 9 extinction event, a pathogen so virulent that it had apparently consumed every human world within a span of 50 years. "Negative, sir. Whatever killed the crew, it wasn't biological. Energy weapon burns, decompression damage, kinetic impacts. This ship saw combat before it was abandoned." Dr. Kef Thursday, a pale humanoid from the Ethereal Collective, looked up from his meditation circle where he had been communing with the ship's remaining data cores. His species possessed limited telepathic abilities that proved invaluable when dealing with corrupted or damaged information systems. The ship's designation was UES Harbinger. It was part of something called the Phantom Fleet. "I'm detecting references to special operations, deep space reconnaissance, and..." He paused, his milky white eyes widening slightly. "Asymmetric warfare protocols." Vexai's interest peaked. Human military doctrine was a subject of considerable academic debate. Most species fought wars with clearly defined rules of engagement, formal declarations, and established battlefield etiquette. Humans apparently fought wars the same way they had lived, with desperate creativity and a complete disregard for conventional wisdom. "What kind of asymmetric warfare?" he asked. "I'm having difficulty parsing the exact meaning. The language they use is highly contextual and filled with idioms that don't translate well. But there are repeated references to ghost soldiers, phantom protocols, and sleeping gods." It appears they had contingency plans for scenarios that... Kef Thursday paused again, his brow furrowing in concentration. That don't make logical sense. Plans for fighting wars after losing them. Dr. Yilpara's antennae twitched with amusement. Typical human thinking. They probably had plans for fighting wars after they were dead too. The comment was meant as a joke, but Vexai found himself thinking about it seriously. Human military philosophy often bordered on the irrational. They had somehow convinced themselves that any war could be won through sheer stubbornness and tactical creativity. It was both admirable and deeply unsettling. "What's the status of the cryogenic systems?" he asked. "Most are non-functional. We've recovered 17 bodies so far, all showing signs of extensive military augmentation. These weren't regular soldiers, sir. Enhanced bone density, neural implants, synthetic muscle fiber integration. Whatever the Phantom fleet was, they were elite. And the intact pods? Il para consulter herskanf. 3 pods are still showing minimal power. The occupants appear to be in some kind of extended hibernation state, but our medical scans are inconclusive. Human physiology is unusual. They seem to have redundant systems that keep functioning even under conditions that should be fatal." Vexai made his way to Section 7, his hooved feet clicking on the metal decking. The Kethmoran had been his home for over a decade, and he knew every sound a ship made, every vibration that meant normal operation versus potential danger. But as he entered the human specimen area, he felt a strange sense of unease that he couldn't quite identify. The section had been converted from its original cargo bay configuration into a sterile laboratory environment. Rows of examination tables held various human artifacts, weapons that were somehow both primitive and sophisticated, armor systems that seemed to anticipate types of damage that other species had never even considered, and personal effects that spoke to a culture that embraced both sentimentality and violence with equal passion. But it was the 3 intact cryogenic pods that drew his attention. They were unlike any preservation technology he had encountered. Instead of the elegant crystal matrices that most species use for long-term storage, humans had opted for what appeared to be deliberately intimidating metal sarcophagi. Each pod was emblazoned with warnings in multiple human languages, skulls and crossbones, and serial numbers that meant nothing to him. "Have you attempted to access their medical data?" he asked Yilpara. "We tried, but the security systems are remarkably sophisticated. The pods appear to be designed to resist tampering, even for medical personnel. It's as if they expected someone might try to open them against the occupant's will." Vexai approached the nearest pod, pod designation 7. According to the faded stenciling, it contained someone identified as Phantom-9 SGD, Major Elena Vasquez, Deep Recon Specialist. The name meant nothing to him, but the pod itself radiated an aura of barely contained menace. Small displays flickered with vital signs that, according to his understanding of human physiology, should have been impossible. Heart rate too slow, brain activity too complex, blood oxygen levels that defied explanation. "What about Pod 9?" he asked, gesturing to the largest of the 3 containers. This one was different from the others, covered with additional warning labels and what appeared to be additional security systems. "That's the interesting one," Yilpara said, her voice taking on excited tone that made her mandibles click together. "The power consumption is 3 times higher than the others, and the occupant's vital signs are, well, they're not like anything we've seen. Brain activity suggests the subject is not fully unconscious. It's more like they're actively dreaming, but with a level of neural complexity that would normally indicate they're awake and engaged in intensive cognitive tasks." Vexai studied Pod 9 more carefully. The nameplate read Phantom-9, classified, Project Lazarus, Final Protocol. Unlike the others, this pod had what appeared to be additional life support systems jury-rigged to its exterior. Someone had clearly wanted to ensure this particular individual survived, regardless of what happened to the ship around them. Dr. Kef Thursday joined them, his ethereal robes flowing in the recycled air. "I've been trying to access their neural networks while they sleep. It's disturbing. Their minds are structured differently from other species. Where most sentient beings have clearly defined conscious and unconscious states, humans seem to exist in multiple layers of awareness simultaneously. And this one," he gestured to Pod 9, is dreaming of violence. Elaborate, Vex-High commanded. It's difficult to describe. Most species dream of memory consolidation, problem-solving, or random neural firing patterns. This human is dreaming of tactical scenarios, combat situations, battle plans. It's as if their mind is continuously preparing for war, even in hibernation. The research team spent the next several hours taking detailed scans of all three pods, but Pod 9 continued to present the most intriguing mysteries. The individual inside appeared to be male, approximately 2 meters in height, with extensive cybernetic modifications that went far beyond anything they had seen in the other specimens. Neural interfaces, skeletal reinforcement, what appeared to be integrated weapons systems, and something their scanners couldn't properly identify embedded in his brainstem. I think we should attempt to wake one of them, Dr. Yilpara suggested during their evening briefing. The scientific value would be enormous. A living human could answer questions about their culture, their technology, their final days as a species. Vex-High considered this carefully. The Galactic Council had strict protocols about reviving extinct species, particularly ones with a history of violence. But the potential knowledge gain was undeniable, and humans had been gone for 2 centuries. What possible threat could a single disoriented survivor pose to a ship full of trained researchers? Which pod would you recommend? He asked. Pod Shudmum. Sergeant Major Vasquez appears to have the most straightforward cybernetics and the most stable vital signs. She was designated as a reconnaissance specialist, which suggests intelligence gathering rather than direct combat. It seemed logical. Vex-High nodded his approval. Prepare the revival protocols. We'll attempt the procedure tomorrow morning when all departments can provide support staff. That night, as the ship's artificial cycle shifted to its rest period, Vex-High found himself unable to sleep. He wandered the corridors, eventually ending up back in Section 7. The 3 pods hummed quietly in the darkened laboratory, their status lights painting everything in soft blues and greens. He paused in front of Pod 9, studying the warning labels more carefully. Most were in English, which he could read fluently, but some were in other human languages that their translation protocols struggled with. One label, however, was crystal clear. Warning, Phantom-9 revival authorized only under Directive 7 Alpha. Extinction Level Threat Protocol. Do not open without proper command authorization. Extinction Level Threat Protocol. What could that possibly mean? What kind of threats had humans anticipated that would require someone like this to be awakened? As he stood there pondering, he noticed something troubling. The power indicators on Pod 7 were fluctuating. Dr. Yilpara had mentioned that the power systems were delicate, but this looked like more than normal variation. The pod's life support seemed to be failing. Vex-High quickly activated his communicator. Dr. Yilpara to Section 7, Emergency. While waiting for her to arrive, he ran a quick diagnostic on Pod 7 systems. The readouts were alarming. Critical system failures across multiple subsystems. If they were going to revive Sergeant Major Vasquez, it would have to be now, or she would die before they could attempt the procedure. Yilpara arrived within minutes, still wearing her sleep clothing. What's the situation? Pod 7 is dying. We have maybe 6 hours before complete life support failure. She quickly confirmed his diagnosis, her compound eyes reflecting the alarm displays. We could transfer her to Pod 9's life support temporarily. It has excess capacity. Is that safe? It's safer than letting her die. The transfer would require opening Pod 9's auxiliary systems, but we wouldn't need to wake the occupant. They worked quickly, connecting additional life support lines between the 2 pods. The process required opening several access panels on Pod 9, and Vex-High couldn't help but notice the sophisticated nature of the equipment inside. This wasn't just a cryogenic pod. It was something much more complex. As they worked, Kef Thursday arrived, drawn by the unusual psychic emanations. The mental activity in Pod 9 is increasing, he reported. The additional power draw seems to be affecting the occupant's dream state. As long as we don't wake him, we should be fine, Yilpara said, making the final connections. There, Sergeant Major Vasquez's life signs are stabilizing. But something was wrong. The displays on Pod 9 were showing changes that none of them had anticipated. Heart rate increasing, brain activity spiking, internal temperature rising. Is he waking up? Vex-High asked. Kef Thursday pressed his hands against his temples, his face contorting in concentration. Something's wrong. His dreams are changing. He's dreaming about us. That's impossible. He can't know we're here. The neural interfaces, they're more sophisticated than we thought. He's accessing the ship's sensor somehow. He knows there are non-humans on board. And Kef Thursday stepped back from the pod, his face pale. He's planning. The warnings on Pod-9 suddenly took on new meaning. This wasn't just a soldier in hibernation. This was something else entirely. Something that had been designed to wake up when humanity faced an extinction-level threat. And they had just triggered his awakening protocols. Deep inside Pod-9, behind layers of titanium and ceramic armor, Phantom-9's eyes opened for the first time in over 2 centuries. His augmented vision immediately began cataloging threats, assessing tactical situations, and preparing for a war that everyone else thought had ended long ago. The last guardian of humanity was awake, and he was very, very angry. The first thing Phantom-9 became aware of was the taste of copper and antiseptic in his mouth, followed immediately by the subtle wrongness in the air composition that told him he wasn't aboard a human vessel. His enhanced nervous system came online in stages, each augmented sense feeding information to his tactical analysis centers before his conscious mind even fully engaged. Non-human voices, unfamiliar technology signatures, the chemical traces of at least 4 different alien species in the immediate vicinity. His eyes remained closed, but the cybernetic implants behind them were already mapping the room through electromagnetic sensing and audio triangulation. 3 hostiles within immediate striking distance. Additional contacts throughout the larger structure. No human life signs detected anywhere within sensor range. The implications hit him like a physical blow. The mission had failed. Humanity was gone. But his orders were still clear, burned into his neural pathways by programmers who had anticipated this exact scenario. Survive, assess, adapt, respond. The Phantom Protocol existed for one purpose: to ensure that humanity's enemies paid a price for their victory, even if that victory was total. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chun, callsign Phantom-9, former Deep Reconnaissance and asymmetric warfare specialist of the United Earth Defense Force, began the process of coming back to life. Outside the pod, Vexai watched the displays with growing concern. The neural activity spikes were becoming more pronounced, and several systems that had been dormant were now showing active power draws. How long until the revival process is complete? Dr. Yilpara was running every diagnostic she could think of, her fingers dancing across multiple interfaces. I don't think we're controlling this anymore. The pod seems to have initiated an automatic revival sequence when we connected the auxiliary life support. It's as if the system interpreted our intervention as an emergency activation signal. Can we stop it? I wouldn't recommend it. The revival process involves complex neurochemical rebalancing and cellular regeneration. Interrupting it now could cause permanent brain damage or death. Kef Thursday had moved away from the pod, his ethereal features twisted with concentration and fear. His mind is structured differently than I expected. Most sentient beings have a single stream of consciousness, but this one has multiple parallel thought processes running simultaneously. Combat analysis, threat assessment, strategic planning, and something else I can't identify. It's like watching a military computer that happens to be organic. You're reading his thoughts? Not reading exactly. More like observing the patterns of neural activity. But the complexity is extraordinary. And there's something else. He knows we're here. He's been conscious and aware for the last several minutes, but he's deliberately remaining still while he gathers information. Vexai felt a chill run down his spine. You mean he's pretending to be unconscious? More than that. He's using our own scanning equipment to map our positions and capabilities. Somehow his neural interfaces are accessing our sensor data. The revelation that their subject was not only awake, but actively spying on them changed everything. Vexai activated his emergency communicator, intending to alert ship security, but found that his signal was being blocked by some kind of localized interference. Inside the pod, Marcus completed his preliminary tactical assessment. The vessel he was aboard was clearly a research ship, not a military craft. The aliens examining him appeared to be scientific personnel rather than soldiers, which meant they were likely unprepared for violence. The ship's internal communications were now under his control, thanks to the surprisingly vulnerable computer systems that these species used. The cybernetics that had made him one of humanity's most effective shadow warriors were far more sophisticated than anything these aliens had encountered. Neural interfaces that allowed direct interaction with electronic systems, enhanced reflexes that could process information and react faster than most organic brains could even perceive threats, and muscles enhanced with synthetic fibers that gave him strength far beyond normal human parameters. But more than his physical capabilities, it was his training that made him dangerous. The Phantom program had taken volunteers from Special Forces units across Earth and subjected them to modifications that were barely legal even by wartime standards. They had been designed to operate alone behind enemy lines for extended periods, to survive in environments that would kill normal humans, and to accomplish missions that conventional forces couldn't even attempt. Marcus had been one of only 12 operatives to survive the full program. Now, apparently, he was the only one left alive in the entire universe. The pod's revival sequence reached its final stage, and Marcus felt the restraint systems beginning to disengage. It was time to make his presence known. His eyes opened, and 3 alien researchers found themselves staring into the enhanced optical sensors of humanity's last ghost soldier. "Good morning," Marcus said in perfectly accented Galactic standard, his voice calm and conversational despite having been asleep for over 2 centuries. "I trust you're having a productive day examining my remains." Dr. Yilpara's antennae immediately flattened against her head in a defensive posture. "You're awake. That's remarkable. How do you feel?" Marcus sat up slowly, his movements precise and controlled. The alien stepped back involuntarily, some primitive survival instinct recognizing the predator in their midst despite his casual demeanor. "Physically, I feel excellent. Psychologically, I'm processing the extinction of my entire species. Tactically, I'm assessing whether you represent a threat that needs to be neutralized." Vexhai struggled to maintain his composure. The human's casual mention of violence was delivered in the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. "We mean you no harm. We're researchers with the Galactic Archaeological Consortium. We've been studying human artifacts and remains to preserve your culture's legacy." "Artifacts and remains," Marcus repeated thoughtfully. "I suppose that's what we've become. Tell me, what happened to Earth?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vexhai realized that this human likely had no knowledge of his species' fate, and that the information they provided could significantly influence his behavior. According to our historical records, humanity was wiped out by a biological weapon approximately 200 years ago. The pathogen spread across all human colonies within 50 years. There were no survivors. Marcus absorbed this information without any visible emotional reaction. Biological weapon. Interesting. That wasn't among the primary extinction scenarios we had planned for. Who deployed it? We don't know. The records from that period are fragmentary. Some theories suggest it was an accident. Others propose it was a deliberate attack by an unknown hostile force. Unknown hostile force. Marcus smiled, but there was nothing friendly about the expression. That narrows it down to roughly half the galaxy, given humanity's diplomatic track record. Dr. Kev Thursday spoke up from his position near the far wall. "Your neural patterns suggest you're not experiencing the emotional distress we would expect from someone learning about the extinction of their species." Marcus turned his attention to the ethereal being, and Kev Thursday immediately regretted drawing that focused gaze. "My emotional responses have been optimized for operational effectiveness. Grief is a luxury that field operatives can't afford. But don't mistake emotional control for lack of motivation." "What kind of motivation?" Vexhai asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. "The kind that involves making whoever killed my species regret that decision." Marcus stood up from the pod, his full height and the obvious integration of combat modifications making him an imposing figure in the laboratory setting. "But first, I need to understand the current political situation. Who's in charge of the galaxy these days?" Yilpara consulted her data tablet, trying to project an air of helpful cooperation while simultaneously calculating the distance to the emergency alarm. "The Galactic Council maintains peacekeeping authority over most inhabited systems. It's a confederation of 47 member species working together for mutual benefit and protection. 47 species, Marcus mused. That's more cooperation than humans ever managed to achieve. How do they convince everyone to work together? The usual methods: trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, shared scientific research. The Council has been very successful at preventing large-scale conflicts. Preventing conflicts. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. And I'm sure they've been very careful to ensure that no single species becomes too powerful or independent. The researchers exchanged uncertain glances. There was something in the human's tone that suggested he was leading the conversation toward a specific point, but they couldn't determine what it was. The Council does maintain certain oversight functions, Vexai admitted, but it's for the benefit of all species, to prevent the kind of wars that devastated the galaxy in previous eras. Wars like the ones humans fought. Well, yes, humanity was considered particularly problematic from a peacekeeping perspective. Your species had a tendency toward conflict that made integration into the galactic community challenging. Marcus laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be more unsettling than if he had become angry. Challenging. That's diplomatic language if I ever heard it. Let me guess. The Council tried to regulate human expansion. Humans told them exactly what they could do with their regulations, and things escalated from there. The historical records suggest that tensions were increasing prior to the biological attack, Kef Thursday said carefully. But there's no evidence that the Council was involved in humanity's extinction. Evidence. Marcus began walking around the laboratory, his movements casual but his eyes constantly scanning for potential weapons, exits, and tactical advantages. That's the interesting thing about evidence. It has a tendency to disappear when it's inconvenient for the people in power. The implications of his words sent a chill through the research team. Vexai realized that this human wasn't just a survivor from an extinct species. He was a professional paranoid whose job had been to suspect everyone and trust no one. What exactly are you suggesting? Yilpara asked. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm observing that my species was considered a problem by the galactic authorities, and now my species is conveniently extinct due to an unknown pathogen from an unknown source. That could be a remarkable coincidence, or it could be the most successful false flag operation in galactic history. Marcus paused in his inspection of the laboratory, his attention caught by a display showing the current galactic political map. This is interesting. Human space has been divided up between 4 different council members. Very efficient. I imagine the mining rights alone were worth quite a bit. Those territories were unclaimed after humanity's extinction, Vexai protested. The Council couldn't just leave them empty. Of course not. Waste not, want not. Marcus studied the display more carefully, his enhanced vision picking up details that the aliens probably didn't realize were visible. Tell me, when exactly did the Council begin colonizing former human space? Dr. Yilpara checked her historical database. The first colonies were established 17 years after the last confirmed human death. 17 years. That's remarkably fast for a bureaucracy to decide on territorial redistribution, isn't it? Almost like they had the paperwork already prepared. The research team was beginning to understand that they were dealing with someone whose mind worked very differently from theirs. Where they saw historical facts and administrative processes, he saw patterns of evidence and chains of causation. He wasn't just asking questions. He was conducting an investigation. What are you planning to do with this information? Vexai asked. Marcus turned back to face them, and for a moment they saw something in his eyes that made it clear why the Phantom program had been classified at the highest levels. I'm planning to find out who killed my species, and then I'm planning to kill them back. That's impossible. You're one individual against the entire galaxy. You'd be surprised what one properly motivated individual can accomplish. Marcus smiled again, and this time there was definitely something predatory about it. Besides, I'm not just any individual. I'm Phantom-9. I'm what happens when humanity decides that conventional rules don't apply anymore. The lights in Section 7 suddenly dimmed, then returned to normal. Dr. Kef Thursday looked around nervously. Did we just experience a power fluctuation? Marcus shook his head. No, I just finished accessing your ship's computer core. I now have complete control over your vessel's systems, a full copy of your historical databases, and real-time access to Council communication networks. That's impossible. Our systems are heavily encrypted. Your encryption is based on mathematical principles that humans figured out 3 centuries ago. We've been breaking codes like yours since before your species achieved spaceflight. Vexi felt a growing sense of dread. This wasn't just a revived specimen. This was a weapon that had been sleeping for 2 centuries and was now fully operational. What do you want from us? Right now? Information and transportation. Long term, Marcus gestured to the display showing former human space. I want justice. And I want the galaxy to remember why humans were considered dangerous enough to exterminate. You can't seriously be planning to take on the entire Galactic Council. Marcus began walking toward the laboratory exit, and the researchers found themselves stepping aside without consciously deciding to do so. The Council isn't my target. Council members are politicians and bureaucrats. They don't have the capability to develop and deploy biological weapons on the scale that was used against humanity. Then, who is your target? Whoever was capable of killing 60 billion humans while making it look like an accident. That's a very short list of possibilities, and I intend to work through it methodically. As Marcus reached the laboratory door, he paused and turned back to face the research team. Oh, and gentlemen, ladies, you might want to send a message to your superiors. Tell them that humanity's extinction may have been greatly exaggerated. The door slid shut behind him, leaving the researchers alone with the growing realization that they had just unleashed something that the galaxy was not prepared to handle. In the corridor outside, Marcus began his methodical exploration of the ship, his enhanced senses cataloging every detail while his mind planned the next phase of his mission. The galaxy thought humanity was dead and gone, a footnote in their history books. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Captain Thekvor of the Kethmoran was having what he had thought would be a routine day when his communications officer informed him that someone had sent an unauthorized message using their ship's transmitters. The Korvothian captain had been commanding research vessels for 37 years, and, in his experience, unauthorized communications usually meant someone was selling artifact locations to private collectors or smuggling contraband data to competing research organizations. He certainly hadn't expected to learn that his xenobiology team had accidentally revived a human super soldier who had subsequently taken control of his ship's computer systems. Explain to me again, Thekvor said to his assembled department heads, his 4 eyes focusing independently on different members of his crew, how a single specimen from an extinct species managed to compromise our security and send messages to half the galaxy? Chief Research Officer Vexi shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The human cybernetic modifications are far more sophisticated than anything in our databases. Apparently, their military enhancement programs were more advanced than we realized. And this human is currently where? We're not entirely certain, sir. He left Section 7 approximately 6 hours ago, and our internal monitoring systems have been experiencing intermittent malfunctions since then. Security Chief Korthak, a heavily built member of the warrior caste Drexmari, slammed one of his primary fists on the table. Malfunctions nothing. The human is actively jamming our sensors. My teams can't get a solid reading on his position anywhere in the ship. Navigation Officer Sylvie, whose crystalline form allowed her to interface directly with the ship's computer systems, added her own disturbing observations. The computer core has been accessed by an unknown user with administrative privileges. Whoever this human is, he's rewritten significant portions of our security protocols. I can't determine the full extent of the modifications without shutting down primary systems. Captain Thekvor absorbed this information with growing alarm. The Kethmoran was a consortium vessel operating under Council authority in neutral space. If a potentially hostile alien had compromised their ship, the diplomatic implications could be severe. What about these messages he sent? Communications Officer Yaltine consulted her displays with obvious nervousness. 17 different transmissions to various locations across Council space, all heavily encrypted using protocols we don't recognize. We managed to intercept fragments, but the encryption is... She paused, searching for the right words. Sir, the mathematical complexity suggests computational capabilities that shouldn't be possible with organic neural tissue. Give me your best guess about the content. Based on transmission patterns and destination analysis, it appears he was contacting other human facilities or individuals. The messages were sent to coordinates in former human space that don't correspond to any known inhabited systems. The implications of this statement sent a chill through the command crew. If there were other humans still alive, hidden somewhere in the galaxy, then the official history of human extinction was not just incomplete, it was entirely wrong. "Sir," Security Chief Korthak interjected, "we need to consider the possibility that this individual represents a significant threat. His species was classified as dangerous for good reasons. If there are others like him, then we may have just triggered a diplomatic crisis that could destabilize the entire council," Captain Thekfor finished. While the command crew debated their options, Marcus was 3 decks below them in the ship's engineering section, learning everything he could about the current state of galactic technology. His neural interfaces allowed him to absorb information at a rate that would have seemed impossible to the aliens who had awakened him, and what he was learning painted a picture of a galaxy that had become complacent in humanity's absence. The technology was impressive by the standards of his era, but it was also standardized, regulated, and predictable. The Council had apparently succeeded in creating a stable galactic civilization by ensuring that no single species developed capabilities that might upset the balance of power. It was an effective approach to preventing wars, but it had also created technological stagnation. Humans, by contrast, had never been interested in technological stability. They had pursued advancement with the same reckless determination that had characterized every aspect of their civilization. The result was that even after 2 centuries, human technology remained superior in several key areas. Marcus finished downloading the ship's complete technical database and began composing his next set of messages. The first 17 transmissions had been test signals, designed to determine which of humanity's hidden assets were still functional. The responses had been encouraging. 47 automated facilities were still operational, 19 of them in strategic locations that the Council had apparently never discovered. But, more importantly, 3 of the responses hadn't come from automated systems. They had come from humans. Phantom-9 was still alive, operating from a hidden base in the Kepler void. Phantom-12 had survived the extinction event and was currently running deep cover operations within Council space. And, most remarkably, Dr. Sarah Chun, the architect of the Phantom program and Marcus's former commanding officer, was not only alive but had spent the last 2 centuries building a network of resistance cells throughout the galaxy. The humans weren't extinct. They were hiding. Marcus began drafting a more detailed communication to Dr. Chun, but was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside engineering. His enhanced hearing identified at least 6 individuals moving in a formation that suggested military training. The ship's security force had finally decided to locate him. He could have avoided them easily. His modifications included active camouflage systems that would make him effectively invisible to their sensors. But Marcus had decided that it was time to send a different kind of message to the ship's crew. When Security Chief Korthak and his team entered the engineering section, they found Marcus sitting calmly at a workstation, apparently absorbed in reading technical manuals. "You will come with us," Korthak announced, his squad spreading out to cover potential escape routes. "The captain wishes to speak with you." Marcus looked up from his reading with an expression of mild interest. "Of course. I've been hoping to meet your captain. I have some questions about your mission parameters and current location." The ease of his compliance seemed to unsettle the security team more than resistance would have. Korthak had expected to deal with a cornered and desperate survivor, not someone who acted like he was attending a scheduled appointment. As they escorted Marcus through the ship's corridors, he maintained a running commentary on the vessel's design and capabilities that demonstrated an understanding of their technology that should have been impossible. "Impressive shielding configuration," he observed, noting a power relay junction. "The harmonic frequencies suggest Zeltharian engineering with Corvothian improvements. Very efficient for a research vessel, though the power distribution would be vulnerable to focused electromagnetic pulse attacks." "How do you know about our shield harmonics?" one of the security officers demanded. "Your computer systems are remarkably forthcoming once you know how to ask the right questions. I've learned quite a bit about your ship in the last few hours." Did you know that your defensive systems have 17 exploitable vulnerabilities that a properly equipped human strike team could take advantage of? Security Chief Korthak felt a growing unease. This human wasn't just making observations. He was conducting a tactical assessment of their capabilities and weaknesses. When they reached the bridge, Captain Thekvor was waiting with his senior staff arranged in what he hoped was an appropriately intimidating formation. The human who entered his bridge, however, showed no signs of being intimidated by anything. "Captain," Marcus said with a respectful nod, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I realize this situation is unprecedented." "Indeed it is," Thekvor replied carefully. "We need to discuss your status and your intentions." "Certainly. My status is simple. I'm Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chun, United Earth Defense Force, currently on active duty under Special Operations Protocols. My intentions are to determine who was responsible for the biological attack on humanity and to respond appropriately. Humanity is extinct. There could be no response." Marcus smiled, and several of the bridge crew unconsciously stepped back. "Captain, I think you'll find that reports of humanity's extinction have been greatly exaggerated. We've simply been sleeping. You're claiming there are other humans alive?" "I'm not claiming anything. I'm stating a fact. The Phantom program was designed to ensure humanity's survival under extinction-level scenarios. We planned for this possibility and prepared accordingly." Dr. Yilpara, who had been monitoring the conversation from the science station, interrupted with a question that had been troubling her. "If humans survived the biological attack, why haven't you revealed yourselves before now?" "Because we've been investigating. The attack that supposedly killed humanity was extremely sophisticated. It required detailed knowledge of human biology, access to every major human world simultaneously, and the capability to deploy a pathogen that was specifically engineered to target human genetic markers while leaving other species unaffected." Marcus paused to let the implications of his words sink in. That level of capability suggests that whoever was responsible had been studying humanity for a very long time and had significant resources at their disposal. Captain Thekvor felt a chill of understanding. "You believe the attack was deliberate." "I know the attack was deliberate. What I don't know yet is which of the 47 council member species was responsible or whether it was a joint operation." "That's impossible. The council would never authorize genocide. The council authorized the complete annexation of human space 17 years after our supposed extinction. The council classified human culture as inherently violent and unsuitable for galactic civilization. The council had both motive and opportunity." Navigation Officer Sylvie spoke up from her position at the computer interface. "Even if what you're suggesting were true, what could you possibly hope to accomplish? One individual against the entire galactic government." Marcus turned his attention to the crystalline being, and she immediately regretted asking the question. "Officer, I appreciate your concern for the odds, but you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. I'm not one individual against the galactic government. I'm the advanced scout for a species that has spent 2 centuries preparing for war." The bridge fell silent as the crew processed this revelation. If humanity had survived and had been preparing for a conflict for 200 years, the implications for galactic stability were staggering. "What do you want from us?" Captain Thekvor asked finally. "Right now, I want transportation to council space so I can begin the next phase of my investigation. Long term, I want your species to carefully consider which side of the coming conflict you want to be on. And if we refuse..." Marcus gestured casually toward the main display, which suddenly showed detailed schematics of the Keth-Moran's critical systems. "Captain, I currently have complete control of your ship's navigational systems, life support, and communications. I could have killed everyone aboard hours ago if that had been my intention. The fact that you're all still alive should suggest that I'm willing to be reasonable about this. You're holding us hostage. I'm offering you a choice. Help me get to council space, and your crew remains safe. More importantly, when the truth about humanity's extinction becomes public knowledge, you'll be remembered as the researchers who helped expose the conspiracy rather than the ones who try to cover it up." Dr. Vexhai stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "What makes you so certain there was a conspiracy?" Marcus's expression became grim. Because 17 of the messages I sent earlier were to automated monitoring stations that humanity placed throughout the galaxy before our supposed extinction. Every one of them recorded Council ships conducting biological warfare experiments in human space during the time period when a pathogen was supposedly spreading naturally. That's impossible. Captain, in approximately 6 hours, you're going to receive a priority transmission from the Galactic Council ordering you to immediately report to the nearest Council facility for debriefing. They're going to want to know everything about my awakening and what I've told you. They're going to be very interested in ensuring that this information doesn't spread any further. Captain Thekvor stared at the human with growing comprehension. How could you possibly know that? Because I've been monitoring Council communications since I gained access to your transmitter array. The news that Phantom-9 is active has caused quite a stir in certain government circles. Apparently, there are people in power who remember exactly why humanity was considered dangerous enough to exterminate. Marcus began walking toward the bridge exit, then paused and turned back to face the assembled crew. I'll be in Shuttle Bay 2 in 1 hour. Anyone who wants to be remembered as heroes when this is over is welcome to join me. Anyone who prefers to explain to Council investigators why they let humanity's last ghost soldier slip away is welcome to stay here. As the bridge doors closed behind him, Captain Thekvor found himself facing the most difficult decision of his career. He could follow protocol and report the human to Council authorities, or he could trust the word of a member of an allegedly extinct species who claimed the galactic government was built on genocide. Either choice could destroy everything he had spent his life building. But as he looked around at his crew, he realized that some choices were more important than personal consequences. Communications, he said quietly. Send a message to Council headquarters. Inform them that we've experienced a complete system failure and are proceeding to the nearest repair facility. Sir, that's not accurate. No, Captain Thekvor agreed. But it's going to be true very soon. All hands, prepare for emergency departure. We're about to find out whether a 200-year-old conspiracy can survive contact with the truth. 3 days later, the Kethmoran dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima system, home to one of the Galactic Council's largest administrative centers. What should have been a routine approach to a busy hub of galactic civilization instead became a journey into evidence of humanity's hidden war. Marcus stood on the bridge beside Captain Thekvor, his enhanced vision analyzing the sensor readings that were beginning to paint a picture none of the alien crew members had expected. The system's primary asteroid belt, which according to official records contained valuable mining operations, showed signs of recent military activity. Those aren't mining platforms, Marcus observed, pointing to the tactical display. Those are weapons testing facilities. Dr. Yilpara consulted her xenobiology databases, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The energy signatures don't match any known industrial processes. What kind of weapons would require that much power? The kind designed to sterilize entire planets, Marcus replied grimly. Bioweapon development requires extensive testing to ensure proper dispersal patterns and genetic targeting. What you're looking at is probably where they perfected the pathogen that killed my species. Security Chief Korthak, who had initially opposed bringing the human along, found himself studying the tactical readings with professional interest. If those are weapons facilities, they're heavily defended. I'm reading at least 40 automated defense platforms and what appears to be a full battle fleet stationed in the outer system. 40 platforms seems excessive for protecting mining operations, Captain Thekvor agreed. But it would be appropriate for a classified military installation. Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. The question is whether this represents active research or just security around evidence they want to keep hidden. Their answer came in the form of an incoming transmission from Proxima Control. Instead of the routine greeting and approach instructions they had expected, they received a priority military override that redirected them to a facility that wasn't supposed to exist. Research Vessel Kethmoran, you are directed to proceed immediately to Coordination Station 7 for immediate inspection and crew debriefing. Any deviation from this course will be considered a hostile act. Captain Thekvor exchanged glances with Marcus. Coordination Station 7 isn't on any of our navigation charts. It wouldn't be, Marcus replied. Black sites rarely advertise their locations. The station that appeared on their screens as they followed the mandated approach vector was clearly military rather than civilian. Its architecture was purely functional, designed for security and containment rather than the comfortable efficiency that characterized most council facilities. 37 docking bays, Marcus observed, studying the station's layout. Defensive systems that would make a battleship jealous. And, according to your sensors, approximately 15,000 personnel aboard. That's not a research station, Captain. That's a command center. As they docked, Marcus made a point of studying the other vessels secured to the station. Most were unremarkable council ships, but several were configurations he didn't recognize, designs that seemed optimized for stealth and long-range operations rather than official government business. Those ships, he said to Dr. Vexhai, who was monitoring the external cameras, run their configurations against your databases. I'm curious about their official designations. A few minutes later, Vexhai looked up from his analysis with confusion. That's strange. According to our records, none of those ships exist. The design configurations don't match any registered council vessel classes. Unregistered ships at a secret military facility investigating weapons that officially don't exist, Marcus mused. I'm beginning to detect a pattern. Their speculation was interrupted by the arrival of the boarding party. Unlike the mixed-species crews that characterized most council operations, this group was composed entirely of Zeltharians, a species known for their discipline, loyalty, and complete dedication to following orders without question. The leader of the boarding party, a tall Zeltharian with the bearing of a career military officer, stepped onto the bridge and immediately focused his attention on Marcus with an intensity that suggested recognition. I am Colonel Vextera of Council Special Operations. Lieutenant Commander Chun, you will accompany me for debriefing. The use of Marcus's rank and name confirmed what he had suspected. The council knew exactly who he was and had been expecting him. Of course, Colonel. I've been looking forward to meeting representatives of your organization. The exchange was polite on the surface, but everyone on the bridge could sense the underlying tension. These were two professional soldiers from different species, each assessing the other as a potential threat. The rest of your crew will remain aboard your vessel until the debriefing process is complete, Colonel Vextera continued. This is for their own safety. Captain Thekfor stepped forward. With respect, Colonel, my crew has done nothing wrong. We were conducting legitimate archaeological research when we discovered Lieutenant Commander Chen. Indeed. And now you possess information that affects galactic security. The debriefing process will determine how that information should be handled. The implications were clear. The crew of the Kethmoran might never leave this station alive if their testimony was deemed too dangerous to the Council's interests. Marcus followed Colonel Vextera through corridors that were clearly designed for maximum security. Blast doors every 50 meters, surveillance systems that tracked their every movement, and checkpoint stations that required multiple forms of identification to pass through. Impressive facility, Marcus commented as they walked. How long has the Council been operating clandestine military installations? The Council takes the safety and security of all member species very seriously, Lieutenant Commander. Sometimes that requires activities that are not suitable for public knowledge. Activities like genocide. Colonel Vextera paused mid-step, then continued walking without responding. But Marcus had caught the momentary tension in his posture, the slight hesitation that suggested his question had hit closer to the truth than the colonel was comfortable with. They eventually arrived at a conference room that was clearly designed for high-level briefings. The walls were lined with displays showing star charts, fleet movements, and what appeared to be intelligence summaries from across Council space. But what caught Marcus's attention was the central display, which showed a detailed analysis of humanity's former territory. Sitting at the conference table were 5 individuals who represented some of the most powerful species in the galactic government. Marcus recognized them from his downloaded intelligence files. Admiral Korthuna of the Council Defense Force, Dr. Felthera of the Biological Research Division, Minister Yelkoda of Internal Affairs, Director Kexmari of Special Operations, and, at the head of the table, Counselor Prime Velthera of the Zeltharian Republic. Lieutenant Commander Chun, Counselor Prime Velthera said without preamble, we need to discuss your status and your future. My status is simple, Counselor. I'm a military officer whose species was the victim of genocide. My future involves finding the people responsible and ensuring they face justice. Admiral Corthuna leaned forward, her four eyes focusing independently on Marcus with predatory intensity. Your species was eliminated by a biological plague of unknown origin. There was no genocide. Admiral, with respect, that's not accurate. The pathogen that killed humanity was engineered specifically to target human genetic markers while leaving other species unaffected. That level of specificity doesn't occur naturally. Dr. Felthara, whose species had been responsible for many of the galaxy's most significant medical advances, spoke up from her position across the table. Even if the pathogen was artificially created, that doesn't necessarily indicate deliberate genocide. It could have been an accident or the result of unauthorized research. Marcus smiled, and the expression made several of the council members visibly uncomfortable. Doctor, I appreciate your attempt to provide alternative explanations, but I have evidence that makes the truth quite clear. What evidence? Minister Yel-Koda demanded. The kind that involves detailed records of council ships conducting biological warfare tests in human space during the exact time period when the pathogen was spreading. The kind that includes communications between council member species discussing the human problem and potential solutions. The kind that documents the pre-authorization of territorial redistribution plans before humanity was officially declared extinct. The silence that followed this statement was profound. Marcus could see the council members exchanging glances, each trying to determine how much he actually knew and whether it was possible to contain the information. Director Kexmari finally broke the silence. Even if such evidence existed, what would you hope to accomplish with it? Your species is gone, Lieutenant Commander. Revenge won't bring them back. Director, you're laboring under a fundamental misunderstanding. Humanity isn't gone. We've been hiding, planning, and preparing for exactly this situation. Counselor Prime Velthara's expression sharpened. Explain. The Phantom program was designed to ensure human survival under extinction-level scenarios. We identified potential threats to human civilization and developed contingency plans for each one. Biological warfare was Scenario 7. We prepared accordingly. How many of you survived? Admiral Corthuna asked, her tactical mind immediately focusing on the military implications. Enough, Marcus replied. But more importantly, we've spent 2 centuries analyzing galactic politics, studying your technology, and identifying your weaknesses. We know which species were involved in our supposed extinction. We know where your critical installations are located, and we know how to make the galaxy remember why humans were considered dangerous. Minister Yel-Koda attempted to regain control of the conversation. Lieutenant Commander, even if everything you're claiming is true, the past cannot be changed. The current galactic system has brought peace and prosperity to billions of beings. Whatever happened 2 centuries ago, surely the benefits of the current order outweigh. Minister, Marcus interrupted, are you seriously suggesting that genocide is acceptable if it produces favorable political outcomes? I'm suggesting that destabilizing the current galactic order would cause suffering on a scale that would dwarf whatever injustices may have occurred in the past. Marcus stood up from his chair, his movements smooth and controlled despite being surrounded by the most powerful individuals in galactic government. That's where we disagree. I believe that a galactic order built on the foundation of genocide deserves to be destabilized. You're talking about war, Admiral Corthuna said. No, I'll admit it. I'm talking about justice. War is what you started when you decided that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. Dr. Felthara leaned back in her chair, her scientific mind working through the implications of Marcus's presence. What do you want from us? I want a full confession to the galactic community about the Council's role in humanity's genocide. I want reparations paid to the surviving human population. And I want the individuals responsible for the biological attack turned over to human authorities for trial. That's impossible, Director Kexmari stated flatly. Then, we have a problem, Marcus replied. Because those are my minimum requirements for a peaceful resolution to this situation. Counselor Prime Velthara studied Marcus with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent decades in galactic politics. And if we refuse? Marcus's expression became grim. Then, you'll learn why the Phantom program was created, and why humanity's enemies have always regretted underestimating our capacity for creative violence. As if summoned by his words, the station's alarms suddenly began blaring. Emergency lights activated throughout the conference room, and the central display began showing multiple incoming contacts approaching the facility. "Admiral," came a voice through the communication system. "We're detecting approximately 40 unidentified vessels on approach vectors. They're not responding to our hails, and their configurations don't match anything in our databases." Admiral Corthuna activated her personal communicator. "Battle stations. Deploy all defensive platforms." Marcus looked around the table at the council members who had been so confident just moments before. "Gentlemen, ladies, allow me to introduce you to the rest of Phantom Squadron. I believe you're about to learn what 2 centuries of preparation looks like. The war that the Galactic Council thought they had ended with biological weapons was about to begin again, and this time, humanity was ready for it. The approaching human fleet was unlike anything in the Galactic Council's databases. Each ship was a masterpiece of stealth technology and adaptive engineering, designed during 2 centuries of hidden development to be invisible to Council sensors until they chose to reveal themselves. Now, as they dropped their cloaking fields simultaneously, they painted a picture of human ingenuity that sent chills through every military analyst watching the displays. Admiral Corthuna studied the tactical readouts with growing alarm. 40 ships, but our sensors are reading power signatures equivalent to twice that number. How is that possible? Marcus remained standing calmly as chaos erupted around the conference room. "Modular construction, Admiral. Each ship can split into multiple independent units when combat requires it. It's one of the innovations we developed while we were supposedly extinct." Through the station's massive viewing ports, the Council leadership could see the human fleet arranging itself in a formation that seemed to defy conventional military doctrine. Instead of the orderly battle lines that characterize Council naval tactics, the human ships moved in a complex, 3-dimensional pattern that made it impossible to predict their next positions or target them effectively. "Sir," came another report through the communication system. "The lead vessel is requesting permission to dock. They're transmitting Council diplomatic codes that appear to be legitimate." Dr. Felthera looked at Marcus with confusion. "How do you have valid diplomatic credentials?" "Because we never stopped being citizens of the galactic community, Doctor. We just stopped attending the meetings after you tried to kill us all." Counselor Prime Velthera activated his personal communicator. "All stations, this is Counselor Prime. Grant docking permission to the lead human vessel, but maintain full battle readiness." "Sir, are you certain? Do it." 20 minutes later, the conference room doors opened to admit 3 individuals who represented everything the Galactic Council had spent 2 centuries trying to forget about humanity. The leader was a woman in her apparent 30s, though Marcus knew that Dr. Sarachun was actually over 250 years old. Her ageless appearance was the result of the same life extension technology that had kept the Phantom operatives alive through their long hibernation. But her eyes held the accumulated wisdom and anger of someone who had spent centuries planning for this moment. Behind her walked 2 figures that the Council members recognized from their historical databases. Phantom-9, whose real name had been classified even before humanity's supposed extinction, and Phantom-12, who according to official records had been killed in action during humanity's final days. "Counselor Prime Velthra," Dr. Chun said with formal courtesy, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I am Dr. Sarah Chun, Director of the Terran Continuity Project. These are my colleagues, Phantom-3 and Phantom-12. The casual introduction of individuals who were supposed to be dead for 2 centuries sent waves of shock through the Council leadership. If these humans had survived, how many others were still alive? How many were currently operating within Council space without detection? "Dr. Chen," Admiral Corthuna said, struggling to maintain her professional composure, "your presence here raises significant questions about the official historical record." "Indeed it does, Admiral. It raises questions about whether the biological attack on humanity was really the accident that the Council claimed it to be." Minister Yelkoda attempted to redirect the conversation toward damage control. "Dr. Chun, even if there were irregularities in the historical record, surely we can find a way to resolve this situation peacefully. The galaxy has moved beyond the conflicts of 2 centuries ago." Dr. Chen's expression remained perfectly calm, but Marcus could see the controlled anger in her eyes. Minister, the galaxy hasn't moved beyond those conflicts. The galaxy has simply forgotten about them because it was convenient to do so. But we haven't forgotten. We've spent every day of the last 2 centuries remembering. What do you want? Director Kexmari asked bluntly. Justice, Phantom-9 replied, speaking for the first time. His voice carried the flat, emotionless tone that came from decades of psychological conditioning. But more than that, we want the truth. Dr. Chun activated a holographic projector, and suddenly, the conference room was filled with evidence that the council members had hoped was buried forever. Communication intercepts between member species discussing the human problem. Technical specifications for biological weapons that matched the pathogen that had killed humanity. Financial records showing payment for research that was officially non-existent. The Zoltharian Republic, Dr. Chun said, her voice taking on the cadence of a prosecutor presenting evidence, provided the initial research funding. The Hivemar Collective contributed their expertise in genetic targeting. The Ethereal Collective provided psychic screening to ensure the weapon wouldn't affect their telepathic networks. And the Corvothian Empire provided the delivery systems. Each species mentioned had representatives at the table, and Marcus watched their reactions carefully. Shock, denial, and growing fear as they realized that their carefully constructed conspiracy was being systematically exposed. The most interesting part, Phantom-12 added, is that you didn't just plan to kill us. You planned to profit from our deaths. The territorial redistribution agreements were drafted 6 months before the first outbreak. Admiral Corthuna finally found her voice. Even if everything you're saying is true, what's done is done. Starting a war now won't bring back the billions who died. Admiral, Dr. Chin replied, we're not starting a war. We're finishing one. The lights in the conference room suddenly dimmed, and the tactical displays began showing activity throughout the Proxima system. The 40 human ships have been joined by dozens of others, appearing from hiding places that the Council had never suspected existed. How many ships do you have? Counselor Prime Velthara demanded. Enough, Marcus answered. But, more importantly, we have something you don't, which is time to prepare. Dr. Chun gestured to the displays showing the growing human fleet. 2 centuries of technological development without the artificial limitations that the Council imposed on its member species. 2 centuries of military planning by people who had very personal reasons to be creative about warfare. 2 centuries of infiltrating your governments, your militaries, your research facilities. The implications were staggering. If humans had been operating within Council space for 2 centuries without detection, there was no telling how deeply they had penetrated galactic civilization. Dr. Felthara leaned forward, her scientific curiosity temporarily overcoming her fear. How did you survive the biological attack? We didn't, Phantom-9 replied. 60 billion humans died, just as your records indicate. But a small number of us had been genetically modified as part of various military programs. The pathogen was designed to target standard human genetics, but it was less effective against individuals who had been extensively altered. The survivors, Dr. Chun continued, were predominantly military personnel, scientists, and others who had been subjects of enhancement programs. We had the skills and knowledge necessary to rebuild, but we also had the motivation to seek justice for our murdered species. Marcus activated his own holographic interface, and the displays began showing real-time intelligence from across Council space. While you thought we were extinct, we were watching, learning, planning. We know the current locations of every Council fleet. We know which systems have been developed using resources stolen from human space. We know which government officials were involved in the original conspiracy and which ones have continued to cover it up. What do you intend to do with this information? Minister Yell_Coda asked. That depends on you, Dr. Chin replied. We can resolve this situation in one of 2 ways. You can acknowledge the truth about humanity's genocide, provide full reparations to the surviving human population, and submit to justice for the individuals responsible. Or, she gestured to the tactical displays, where the human fleet was now clearly visible in overwhelming numbers. Or we can demonstrate to the galaxy what happens when you try to exterminate a species that refuses to stay dead. Admiral Corthuna studied the tactical situation with the eye of a professional military officer. Your ships are impressive, but they're vastly outnumbered by the combined Council fleet. Admiral, Phantom-12 said with what might have been amusement. You're thinking in terms of conventional warfare. We stopped thinking conventionally about the same time you started trying to kill us. As if to demonstrate his point, the displays suddenly began showing alerts from across Council space. Supply depots experiencing mysterious system failures. Communication networks developing unexplained interference. Military installations reporting security breaches that seemed to accomplish nothing except demonstrate how vulnerable they were. We don't need to defeat your fleets in battle, Dr. Chen explained. We just need to prove to the galactic community that the Council has been lying to them for 2 centuries. And we need to ensure that the species responsible for humanity's genocide understand that actions have consequences, even if those consequences take time to arrive. Counselor Prime Veltheroff finally understood the true scope of what they were facing. This wasn't just a military threat. It was a complete systematic exposure of the foundations upon which galactic civilization had been built. What are your specific terms? He asked. Dr. Chin outlined them methodically. Full disclosure of the Council's role in humanity's genocide. Public trials for all individuals involved in the conspiracy. Reparations equivalent to the economic value of the territories stolen from human space. And formal recognition of the Terran Continuity Project as the legitimate government of the surviving human population. And if we agree to these terms, then we transition peacefully to a new galactic order based on truth rather than convenient lies. Humanity takes its place as an equal member of the galactic community with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. And if we refuse, Marcus spoke up for the first time in several minutes. Then you learn why the Phantom program was created in the first place. And the galaxy learns what 2 centuries of motivated human ingenuity can accomplish. The Council members exchanged glances, each trying to calculate the political and military costs of their decision. They had spent 2 centuries believing that humanity was a problem they had solved permanently. Now, they were discovering that they had simply created a different kind of problem, one that had been growing stronger and more dangerous while they weren't paying attention. Outside the conference room, reports continued to stream in from across Council space. Human agents were revealing themselves on dozens of worlds, presenting evidence of the conspiracy to local populations and governments. The truth that the Council had worked so hard to bury was spreading faster than they could contain it. Admiral Korthuna made the calculation first. If we agree to your terms, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't seek further revenge in the future? Admiral, Dr. Chin replied, humanity has never been interested in conquest or domination. We've always been interested in justice and the right to exist without interference. Give us that, and we'll be satisfied. Phantom-3 added quietly, but understand that if anyone tries to exterminate us again, they'll find that we've learned from experience. The next time someone attempts genocide against humanity, the response will be immediate and total. It took 6 hours of debate, argument, and careful negotiation, but eventually the Council leadership reached the conclusion that Marcus had known they would from the beginning. The truth was more powerful than any military force, and humanity had spent 2 centuries ensuring that the truth would eventually emerge. The formal announcement came 3 days later, broadcast simultaneously across all major communication networks in Council space. Counselor Prime Velthera, speaking on behalf of the entire Galactic Council, acknowledged that humanity had been the victim of a deliberate biological attack carried out by elements within the galactic government. He announced the establishment of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate the conspiracy and bring those responsible to justice. Most importantly, he formally welcomed humanity back into the galactic community as an equal partner in shaping the future of civilized space. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the human flagship, watching as the combined human fleet prepared to disperse to their new assignments. Some would establish diplomatic missions on Council worlds. Others would begin the process of reclaiming and rebuilding human space. Still others would continue the work they had been doing for 2 centuries, ensuring that nothing like humanity's genocide would ever happen again. Dr. Chin joined him at the viewing port, her expression thoughtful. Do you think they've really learned from this? Some of them have, Marcus replied. Others are probably already planning how to prevent something like this from happening again. But that's fine. We'll be watching. The Phantom program continues. Marcus nodded. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and history has a tendency to repeat itself. As long as there are species willing to use genocide as a political solution, there need to be humans ready to remind them why that's a bad idea. Behind them, the bridge crew was preparing for their next assignment. The war that everyone thought had ended 2 centuries ago was finally over, but the work of ensuring it never happened again would continue for as long as humanity existed. In the end, the greatest victory wasn't in the battle they had fought, but in the proof they had provided that some things are worth surviving for, some truths are worth fighting for, and some species are simply too stubborn to stay extinct when a galaxy needs them most. Phantom-9 smiled as he watched the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, other sleeping soldiers were waking up to continue humanity's longest war, the war for the right to exist.